Oh, yeah, echo. Are we okay? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Oregon State Board of Ag meeting. Today is Thursday, March 13th, 2025. I'm Mila Miller, Chair of the Board. The meeting is now officially called to order. Public comment is scheduled today at 11. We received one public comment already for today's meeting, but anybody in the audience, if you'd like to sign up this morning to provide verbal comments, please make a request, or if you are online, please make a request using the chat box with the name of your organization, or use the sign-up sheet if you're physically here at the entry table. Comment time will be limited to 3 minutes per person. This meeting is being recorded, and I ask board members and guests to please state your name for the record before you begin any of your comments. I'd like to begin by asking Department of Agriculture Board Coordinator Carla Valness to review a few housekeeping items for us.
Good morning, this is Carla. I'd like to begin by asking people to please mute your phones or computer audio during the call to prevent any unnecessary background noise. We also request that only board members and presenters turn on your camera during the call. And if you are joining the call by conference call or remotely, pre-meeting materials are posted on the ODA website at oda.direct/board agriculture, or information will be posted after the meeting. And again, just a reminder, the meeting is being recorded.
Thank you, Carla. Carla, will you please call the roll for introductions, and I'll begin. Elin Miller, Farmer Umpqua.
Chad Allen.
Chad Allen.
Barbara Boyer is excused. Brian Harper is excused. Ty Kluwer.
Ty Cleaver, Farmer Rancher Brewer, Klamath Falls, Oregon, USA.
Go Lopez is delayed this morning. Kirk Mogg is absent. Ellie Norris.
Ellie Norris, Farmer, Douglas County.
Eric Oram.
Good morning, Eric Oram, Farmer from Hepner.
Josh Zielinski is excused. Dean Simonich.
Stacy Simonich, Dean of Oregon State University's College of Agricultural Sciences and Director of the Oregon Agricultural Experiment Station.
Director Sharpelo Hansen.
Good morning, Lisa Sharpelo Hansen, Director, Oregon Department of Agriculture.
We'll go around the room here this morning. Bill, would you like to start?
Bill Miller, Farmer Umpqua.
Hi, Sarah Wright, Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Sunny Summers, Oregon Department of Ag.
Adam Crawford, Oregon Department of Ag.
Andrea Cantu-Shomas, Oregon Communications.
Isaac Stapleton, Oregon Department of Ag.
Rusty Rock, Oregon Department of Ag.
Chris Veneman, Oregon Department of Ag.
Troy Abercrombie, Oregon Department of Ag.
Lindsay A., Oregon Department of Ag.
Casey Prentice, Oregon Department of Ag.
John Santa, Oregon.
We'd also like to ask people who are online to please sign in using the chat box, and please use your enter your name and the organization so we have a record. And again, just a reminder that pre-meeting materials are posted on the ODA website at oda.direct/board agriculture.
Great. Thank you very much, Carla. First agenda item, do I have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I move to approve the minutes as presented. Ellie Norris.
Is there a second?
Ty Cleaver, I second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion, additions, corrections? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Great.
Sorry, would you also do a motion for the January minutes? There's two sets of minutes.
Well, okay. Do we need to do them separate? Because I said minutes plural, but okay. So we'll do a second motion for January minutes.
Eric Oram, I move to accept the minutes for January.
Okay.
Ty Cleaver, I move to second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded for the January minutes, and also just for clarification for everybody, January, we had a chance to work on our report to be presented, which was presented. We're presenting to the legislature today, and so that's what those minutes were all about. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Great. Okay, now moving on to our mighty director and her report.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Salem. We're delighted to have you here in Salem and in the Ag Building. Hopefully, while you're here, you'll have a chance to meet more of the staff that you don't always get to travel with. So please take advantage of them. They are a wealth of knowledge and resources, and I think the more opportunities we all get to interact, the better off we will all be understanding the challenges that face agriculture from multiple different directions. I want to start out by introducing our newest staff member, Adam Crawford is here, and I'll let him talk, if he would come forward, please, to introduce himself, because he does a much more expansive introduction than I do. But Adam came to us about 6 weeks ago from the Department of Administrative Service, and he is serving as our Chief Operating Officer and has come in and just been a great asset in helping us get our arms around our internal operations and integrating them fully into what we do in the programs and being of service. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Board. Yes, for the record, Adam Crawford, the new Chief Operating Officer for the Oregon Department of Ag. Very excited to be here. Most recently came from the Department of Administrative Services Chief Financial Office. Very excited because I had a chance to work with this agency in 2023, where I was the agency's budget analyst. So I got to know this agency as we built the governor's recommended budget for that biennium. Prior to that, worked with a previous Department of Agricultural agency's director, Director Katie Koba at the Department of Administrative Services. She spoke very, very highly of this agency, so very excited to be here. Prior to those two things, worked for about 5 years in the legislature, working primarily in the natural resources and rules space. So currently overseeing and helping out in IT, HR, budget and accounting, as well as facilities. So happy to talk more about budget when it's my time at the agenda.
Thanks, Adam, and welcome again. So I have a series of things I wanted to chat with you about, but I think I'll start out with the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture had its policy meeting in Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago. Coincidentally, OSU was there working on issues advocating for statewide and to get back some of the cuts that had been announced for ag research, along with the Tri-State Potato Commissions. And so we had a chance to interact with each other, and we were not in the same meetings on the Hill, but I think in that we were able to complement each other in terms of the comments. And so in the meetings that I participated in, I tried to bring out the importance of research to Oregon ag and agriculture as a whole. The thing that I can say about that meeting was it's a fascinating time to be in Washington, D.C. And every meeting was about asking questions to see what people knew. Because uncertainty. There is so much uncertainty around what's happening and what it looks like at this point in time, and being very careful because it's likely changing soon. The state departments of agriculture in our meetings on the Hill really talked about the relationships that we have as co-regulators with many of these federal programs and how important it is that they're staffed and funded. There was a lot of concern in terms of the cuts that were being announced at USDA. Secretary Rollins spoke to us one morning, as well as we had House majority and minority leadership around agriculture committees. And so that was really good. Concerns specifically, I think, in FDA and FDA cuts and concerns about what food safety looks like and how that co-relationship goes forward. I think too, you know, it's just a situation that's evolving. I got a call this morning from a stakeholder in the organic space, and they have heard that several of the organic programs are going to be under review in the next week or so, asking us to look to support, you know, those programs and the importance of those across the U.S. So it continues to evolve, and a lot going on. And the word that I've used in almost all of my speeches recently is uncertainty continues to be the farmer's friend, closest friend. And it's uncertainty for the agencies as well in terms of what's coming next. As we go into our meetings this afternoon, I would mention to you one of the issues that has really taking up a significant amount of time, and you may hear about it because it has a lot of controversy around it in terms of challenges bringing Oregon agriculture together, are the fees for our brand inspection program, animal identification. We are running at a deficit. We are running at a deficit month over month. I would say this is not a new issue. It has happened in the past. And for the piece of ownership, we took too long to raise the fees to the cap. That said, we're at a spot now that there are lots of questions being asked. What should it look like going forward? Should it go forward? What is the right mix of the fees in terms of the registration fee, the actual inspection fee? Oh, and what else can we do different? Staff have worked really hard over the last 9 months getting their arms around the program. The program hasn't had a manager of its own for some time because we don't have the cash to pay for it. And so that's made it challenging as well. So you may hear about that in some of my discussions last night, just kind of checking in. It feels like we're making progress. So that is hopeful. But one way or the other, what I have said, we have to fix the algebra equation. The program has to pay for itself. It's an other funded program, and we don't have a backstop for it. So I think people are digging in and looking for a path forward. We are committed as an agency to continuing to look at the program, to look for efficiencies, to look at changing the program in terms of how services are delivered. Casey Prentice has been leading many of those discussions, and I think we're taking some lessons learned from the shipping point inspection program, thinking about what can a self-certification look like so we have less employee expenses to put against it, and what meets the needs of the industry. Ultimately, I would say if this program is not of benefit to the industry because it is an industry-driven fee-for-service program, then we need to talk about what happens to it. I feel like we're past that today, but today is today, much like many of the other conversations. And I do appreciate the industry and the leadership in the organizations really trying to come together, especially over the last several weeks, to find a place that we can land to move forward. But you will likely hear about this. This is it's a sticky wicket for the agency. And as I talked to someone about it this morning, and we were talking about the Ag Labor Panel yesterday, I'm like, oh, I feel a little bad. This is our big sticky wicket right now, but compared to some of the others that are facing all of you, it doesn't have necessarily the same size other than we have to fill the hole. So I just wanted to make you aware of it, should it come up in any of the meetings. The other thing I wanted to mention to you is really an effort to change the culture at ODA around safety. We had a recent OROSHA inspection, And there were deficiencies found in some of the things that we were doing and some safety concerns, especially at one of our remote locations. A lot of it was housekeeping. But what I think it has really brought and heightened our attentions around is our need to put that safety culture first, and how we do that and put more emphasis on it throughout our organization. And so we will be converting one of the positions that we had vacant and turn it into a safety officer for the agency, because we have a significant amount of work to do in terms of looking at the job hazards of the positions that we have in the agency and how we accommodate for that and what equipment might be necessary for it. And I just really appreciate the staff who have really dug in to help lift this up. And will be working to really solidify it in documentation going forward, because those are some of the issues that we have. We don't have necessarily all the written documentation in terms of evaluations that we need. So we have a chunk of work to do there internally moving forward, but we are committed to making sure we have a safe workplace for all of our staff. I would mention to you at each of your places, there is a packet, and this is follow-up from the December board meeting when you heard from the seafood processors about concerns regarding their NPDES, National Pollution Elimination Discharge permits. Ultimately, we reached out to DEQ and have had conversation. They have been working with the industry for some time. It seems to be in a good place where there's some agreement going forward and some changes that are being made. But along with what's in the packet, I would mention there is a House bill that is out there that could be helpful in this realm as well. But just so that you have the follow-up from that issue that came forward. Another thing I would mention, avian influenza, when we were in Newport. Okay, thank you. I'm like, on the coast. When we were on the coast in December, Dr. Ryan Scholes was there. He talked to you about animal health issues, talked about avian influenza. Staff in animal health and in comms have really been doing an exceptional effort of uplifting messages around biosecurity and trying to talk about it in some different ways that maybe it lands with people a little more. I think when I hear biosecurity, it's a very scary words to me. And so talking about, being a guardian of, and what some of the actions are that can help them protect themselves and protect their livestock. And so if you haven't signed up for our releases, do, because they're coming out kind of they're on a regular basis now. And I really think the messaging is excellent. And I appreciate the work in this area to try and normalize the conversation. But anything we all can do to help amplify those systems that help protect people, protect the environment, and protect livestock, I think are just really important. You heard a little bit yesterday from Food Northwest about legislation that they put forward for a study around opportunities in the food sector. I testified on their bill to what money towards a domestic marketing program might look like, because traditionally our economic development efforts have really been in the international space. We have signed up, and I think I may have mentioned this in December, to participate in the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture Taste of the States trade show in Chicago in May. I'm very excited that we're participating, because this is a step in that direction and a step in helping lift up, some of our smaller mid-size food entrepreneurs and getting them into another market. I'm even more excited. We initially only had 3 booths. I believe Lindsay said we have 6 now, 6, and we have waiting lists for people who want to participate. So in terms of an opportunity and feeling like we're moving along, it's something I am very, very excited about what that could do for our small to mid-sized businesses. I think we can't forget, though, that our larger processors are still looking for market, and with the uncertainty right now going on around tariffs, it continues to create concerns. I wanted to follow up and have Isaac Stapleton come forward and give you an update on where we're at in the lower Umatilla groundwater management area process. You may remember back to September, we talked to you about the needs for us to take some actions to protect groundwater from nitrates in around irrigated agriculture. And so Isaac and team have been working with a broad range of people, and I think he can talk to you about where we're at. And as we move to decision points, we'll be bringing things back to you all to get feedback. But this is that ongoing. I'm going to try and do it in stepwise so that you don't have gaps in terms of the information, and hopefully that helps keep all of us up to speed.
Yeah, great. Good morning, Chair Miller, members of the board. Isaac Stapleton, Natural Resources Division Director for ODA. So just to back up the conversation a little bit, to do some foundation setting, DEQ establishes groundwater management areas when there's a pollutant that's identified that reaches a benchmark level that impacts human health, or other benchmarks that are set. And in 1998, the Lower Umatilla Basin Groundwater Management Area, or as we like to say, LUBGWAMA, was established. So it's been a longstanding issue for the state, but recently, within the last several years, there's been an increased focus and attention on this area. And so state agencies, ODA, DEQ, Water Resources Department, and OHA have really come together to coordinate on this effort to move the ball forward to see what we can do to address the problem. This last September, those agencies put together a nitrate reduction plan, came out in September. It identifies strategies that each agency will look at and undertake to try and get our hands around reduction of additionality in this space. So not necessarily remediation, but how do we eliminate adding more nitrate to the problem? And one of the areas that ODA focused on within that strategy is how do we look at the irrigated ag space? So we've got folks that are permitted, and then we have like non-point source folks in the region, and what are we going to do? And one of those things that we said and committed to in that plan was that we would look at what are additional requirements that we can look at with existing authorities and resources that will help us show that there isn't, or to mitigate as best we can, any additional nitrates. So we've been doing quite a bit of work over the last several months looking at what other states have done, what's worked in other states, what hasn't, doing a lot of peer-reviewed lit reviews to see what's the research saying, a lot of stuff from OSU, their publications around nitrate utilization, nitrate transport, all of those factors that growers take into account every single day in their operations. The goal in the plan was to have some type of structure identified and put into rule by the end of 2025 into 26. We are, I think, on pace for that. We have a draft set of rules. We have a RAC that is going to be starting up in actually next week. So we'll have our first RAC meeting on the 20th. Eric Orem has graciously agreed to be one of the folks to sit on that and give us some very direct feedback, and we really appreciate that. Just to give you some guidelines of where we came from on the rules. So some of the principles that we looked at, right? First, it's got to fit into the agency's existing resources at this point. There isn't new funding, new positions to do additional rules or enforcement. So we've got to play in our current sandbox. the goal needs to be to reduce the nitrate loading in the soils. The rules that are in place will need to be meaningful for growers, and they need to be, we really tried to approach this from leaving the decision-making in the grower's hands. So recognizing that there's a diversity of crops and production systems in the region, but how do we give the growers some guideposts to say, do these things when you're making your decisions? So when we're looking at like agronomic rates, make sure that you've documented that agronomic rate and that you're back checking how successful was I in that cropping cycle of capturing and fully utilizing the nitrogen that I applied for the crop. So that's how we looked at it. I'm sure that the RAC will give us lots of feedback on all of the pieces, and it will be, I think, a lengthy process. We don't intend to rush through this rulemaking. We want to take it very, very methodical and move through so that we have something that is a good, solid set of rules at the end. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Yes.
Ellie Norris. So just for my edification, is there a way that when you take a sample of nitrogen in the water to trace it back to the source? Like, is that ag or versus residential? Is there a way to determine that?
Not really. So this is a massive diffuse problem, right? It's not easy or possible to determine, like, was it nitrogen that you applied or nitrogen that your neighbor applied or one that came from, you know, somebody fertilizing their lawn or something like that. So no, that's not easy. And a lot of what we've been looking at from other states and in our draft rules is how do we look at and give growers management decision tools for their operation as best we can. So looking at soil nitrate sampling, you know, within their field, and not looking at groundwater monitoring as the metric, right? They need to be able to use those samples as a decision-making tool for themselves. Water samples don't get you that because of the lag time in terms of impact to groundwater. So it could be multiple years before you see what you did on the surface show up in the groundwater.
Thank you.
Elin Miller for the record. I really am happy with the direction you're going from an efficiency focus for nitrogen, because if a farmer can save money by making it make more sense and the environment at the same time, I don't know anybody who would not be happy about that. So I like that approach, because I think the whole key is to ensure everybody's embracing what can we all do. So I applaud the progress. And I'll remind the board at the very end of this meeting, we talk about what should be in our quarterly report, and maybe this should be one of them. So let's be taking notes about subjects that come up during this meeting. Again, to the quarterly report, we're restarting for going to the legislature. So thank you. Yeah. That's cool.
Thanks, Isaac. Yeah. That was helpful. I want to talk to you just a little bit about what is in your written packet under my report. This is a larger than normal packet for all of you. As we started to put the packet together and I was thinking about all that we had going on, I wanted to give you a sense of some of the things that we're being measured on. And so in your packet, written report, I'm not going to go through it. You have your second quarterly strategic plan update. That's talking about some of the things that we're doing around the 3 goals that we have. As a reminder, organizational excellence, modernization, and customer-focused service are our 3 priority goals for the agency. And so as we're moving forward, we really are trying to capture those things so that, 1, people know we're committed to doing it, and 2, it's making a difference, tying things back to the strategic plan. I think one of our next steps will be really thinking about what measurable targets are rather than just anecdotal targets. And so we have some more work to do there. Also included, what you're used to seeing, are the division updates. And that was a pretty lengthy again, in terms of there's a lot going on in the agency. You haven't seen this, but I think it's a good one to know what I'm being measured against. When Governor Kotek came into office, she gave agency directors 11 expectations. Those 11 expectations are captured in the Oregon Agency Expectations Report, and it reports out quarterly through the Department of Administrative Services. In the future, I'll think about a way, if you are interested in following what we're doing here at ODA and maybe capturing it in a more concise way. But as you look through, you can see how ODA is doing in terms of meeting the targets that have been laid out for us in the agency expectations. Additionally, you probably received an email this week from me. I am scheduled for my 360 review. Please, I encourage your participation and value your feedback in terms of how I'm doing in the position and the direction that we're going here in the Department of Agriculture. And then we also included a timeline of rulemakings that are scheduled. We provided this to the tribes recently. We also are working more in terms of the Oregon Natural Resource Agencies in keeping each other posted on what's happening in terms of rulemaking. And the governor has added some additional expectations into our rulemaking processes for us. But I wanted you to have a sense for upcoming rulemakings that we have planned. Clearly, there can be other things that come along, like emergency diseases, where we end up doing something that are emergency rules to address things, time and space. But there are specific processes around that as well. Some of you, if you've been around for a while, may have seen our ODA Key Performance Measure Report. It's included in your packet this time. This will be part of our budget presentation. These key performance measures have been in place for quite some time. The one that is standardized across all state government agencies is customer service. And we know we have some room to make improvements there, i.e. part of the strategic plan. But I think also as we've looked at the key performance measures that are in place today for the agency, we likely will be asking for legislative permission to go make some changes in these going forward to try and update them to help us for where we're at today. So more to come on that. And then also you have water quality management area plan biennial reviews, which is part of the feedback that the board gives to the agency. So like I said, larger than normal packet, but things that I felt were important to share with all of you just to get a sense for us in terms of what we're doing in operations. With that, I'm going to leave you with something fun. We were approached by KGW and regents around doing spotlights on agriculture as part of a food is medicine, local foods movement. We recently worked with them to record a commercial that'll be playing during one of their morning shows, and I anticipate at some point we'll have some more participation and be able to go on to the morning show and talk about Oregon agriculture. But I thought it'd be fun to share the commercial with all of you before it airs. So let's see if this works. Cross our fingers. Yes, in terms of the technical part of it. Carla, do we have technical, we could show it later if it's going to take up too much time to try and figure out the technical part of it.
Or while you're figuring it out, I had just some comments on Lisa's report. Lisa, thank you. Obviously timely, just a few highlights from me. The fact that Lisa, within months being selected as director, she's on the NASDA board, the National Association of State Departments of Ag, which is huge. So being able to influence things at the federal level, especially now, is pretty cool. Secondly, Eric and I have the opportunity to meet with Lisa and Carla and some of the team in advance of this meeting to prep for the meeting. I said 154 pages in our board book this time. And when we dug in and had a chance to look, I just really appreciate you sharing the enormity. I think a lot of times we forget all the extra things that need to be done and the department is doing that's very measurable, that actually the public would like go, wow, government measures itself. Isn't that interesting? So thank you for sharing that. And I've been on the board for 4 years, and I don't think I've seen any, well, of course, not the new ones that the governor has started, but any of the other reports too. But we talked about how we might be able to red light, green light, make it simpler, but also just commend on the governor's report how well the Department of Ag is doing. Because you look, it's the names, the lists of all the departments and how people are, how the departments are doing, and we are doing exceedingly well, but in a couple areas less so that we already know about and you're working on through the strategic plan. So I just wanted to comment on that. And have I stalled long enough, Carla? No. Okay. All right. Well, we will definitely show this commercial later. So I would like to ask Jonathan, Lindsay, and Adam to please come forward for a discussion on budget and legislative update.
And Chair Miller, if I might
Yes.
add, I just want to say how much I appreciate this team, including team in the director's office that aren't all here today, and the work that they're putting into this legislative session in terms of tracking legislation, participating, and really working and digging in to help find solutions to help things make work for agriculture. And so just publicly, I want to say thank you to all of you.
Great.
Well, good morning, Chair Miller, Director Sharples Hanson, members of the board, Jonathan Sandow, Deputy Director here at the Department of Ag. This is a great time of year. We love legislative session. I love legislative session. I don't know if anybody else does, but I think these meetings are always great because this is the main topic, and so it kind of makes my part a little bit more condensed and more streamlined. Because obviously, we heard a lot of the conversation last night from folks who are working directly on issues that we may or may not be able to directly engage with. And so today, I'm just going to kind of go through really kind of agency-specific pieces, things that impact ODA, pieces that we're working on, and kind of that perspective through session. I think, I'd set it up of just saying, these long sessions, right, we have our budget, which takes up a lot of time and energy. We do have some of our own policy bills. And then really kind of our role throughout session is working with, legislators, kind of those partners that were here last night, the governor's office. It really I think the way that I've always tried to approach it with, especially new legislators, is just say, this is what I'm seeing. This is how we would implement it. Is this really matching with what you're intending? A lot of times the answer is, oh, no, not really. And that's where we really start getting into a lot of conversations. But it's really kind of providing that, like, here's the practical perspective of how an agency would implement it, whatever the legislation may be. And so we did a little bit of a write-up. I think it's behind tab 4. And, I obviously won't read this, thoroughly to you, but, I think to kind of give that sense of a universe, this number is now dated because this was from last week, but we're about 3,400 bills introduced in this session. That is a lot. That is about where we ended at the end of the 23 session in total bills, and we still have a lot of runway ahead of us. Now, the deadlines have passed for just kind of big tranches of introduction, but priority bills, committee bills, all these other types of things will still continue to come through session. Through our bill tracking system, we have about 350 that we're watching. That's not all that are impacted, our agency, but ones that, either enterprise-wide bills, right, that impact the operations of the agency, agricultural bills that impact, kind of our sector or directly us. Our 6 bills, we went through these, a few board sessions ago. But I think just to try to provide that kind of a quick update on really where they're at. Our 3 fee bills are now successfully all in Ways and Means Committee. One took a diversion off to House Revenue and now has found its way back. But all 3 are down in the Joint Ways and Means hearing after passing through policy committees. And so those will really be wrapped up kind of inside of our budget conversation and worked through the Ways and Means process. We have 3 policy bills. I'll say that this session has been a little bit different in terms of how we've been able to approach the legislature with our own bills. We've typically had an experience where agency bills are first week because we're ready to go. They're usually not controversial, right? I mean, they're easy bills for committees to start with. This time around, some of these committees chose to start with some pretty big bills and not necessarily the agency bills. And so we've been working our way into and through schedules. And so they're kind of all over the place by now. Usually by now we are off the first floor. But really the committees have taken a very different approach. But one of our bills, actually 2 of them, one went yesterday. 2 of our bills now have cleared the Senate floor. And so now they're on the House side. And then our civil penalty bill, Senate Bill 832, will be up for a work session next week in Senate Judiciary. And then it will move along its way. And so all 6 of our bills are, kind of on track, going where they should go. I kind of provided a list of just kind of like focused bills that either we're really working on, that we've had some either deeper conversations around or really, either fiscals that we have them on, or, just that engagement. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they are listed out there. I think you'll see a common theme of what we've talked about and what you've heard. Wolves, brands, the brands inspection program, a lot of kind of water bills are on that list. To start rounding this out, another big kind of component, and Adam will touch on our budget itself, but is really how the agency kind of resources all these asks, and that's through fiscal impact statements. And so every bill that has us named in it, has a program in it, we get requests for fiscal impacts. And it's a delicate kind of balance of looking at it, right? You have to look at it as the bill itself. And so what is the resources does it take to implement what the legislation in that bill asks you to do? It's really hard to kind of compound and stack the overall impacts of many, many bills, or kind of adding to the work that you have. And so, we oftentimes have minimal fiscals. That doesn't mean that there's not a cost associated. That doesn't mean we're not diverting resources away from, something else to do this additional work. It just means we can't justify, a whole position to do what's inside the bill. It becomes, so we have a lot of those conversations. We are making a list this year of all of our minimal fiscals, and we'll go back and say, hey, look, like this is adding up to actually fiscal work. And so, that is how, we kind of interact. And I'd say those fiscal impacts can get both political, because if there is a fiscal impact, then it goes to the Joint Ways and Means Committee, which has a whole different political strategy for bill proponents, lobbyists, all those folks. And so there's a lot of pressures, around those of the fiscal impacts. And that's kind of why I wanted to just, spend a little bit of time with that one. Last thing is I think just some key deadlines for you all to be aware of. Obviously we track these a bit closer, but April 9th is what we call first chamber deadline. And that is really when everything that hasn't moved out of the first chamber becomes effectively, it will have what they call like diet in committee, right? So if it's not out of committee in its first chamber, it can no longer be heard, worked, or moved forward. And so we'll go from 3,400 bills down to closer to like 1,800, right? Something around there. It drops off pretty fast. Revenue, there are obviously caveats, but that's a whole nother conversation. But revenue forecast, May 14th. This one is pretty key, especially when we're talking around our budgets and state financing. The May revenue forecast will really kind of dictate then the end of session spending, right? How much money goes into the agencies, what goes into priorities, what goes into which bills get funded out of Ways and Means. So that revenue forecast is really the driver for the completion of budgets, the funding of bills, the funding of packages, the negotiations that go on around that. May 23rd, second chamber deadline. Again, kind of like the first chamber deadline, but once those policy bills flip committees, they got to move out of their committees by that day, or they effectively die in committee. Policy committees usually shut down around then, and then it's really floor and budget sessions from there on out until June 29th, which is the constitutional sine die, which is a Sunday, and they usually go all the way till the end of those days, and so that kind of gives you those benchmark timelines throughout the session. So I'll pause there, see if there's any questions directly for me, but I think we'll obviously be here for conversation too.
Any questions? I have just one. So on the fiscal impact, because you can, end up adding up, as you said, a lot of small things. So if it's significant, does it go in to the package, or how does that then relate if the bill passes to relate to budget? I mean, what's the threshold? And maybe you said it.
Threshold for?
Well, like for recognition of fiscal impact that, if this is going to take 3 FTEs, is it, that's, triggers it versus 0.5, but 0.5 and 0.5 and 0.5 add up, which I think was the point you were making before. So is there a guidance that, again, not to have the department get caught, because if folks want the department to do things, it costs money. And a lot of times, at least I found in other states and federally, that sometimes doesn't follow.
So Chair Miller, and Adam will be a lifeline here, but I'll see if I'm correct on the first cut, and then he can correct me. I believe it's around the 50,000 mark of what goes to Ways and Means, and then what just is kind of considered, goes through its regular policy track. I think the kind of those caveats are, well, I don't know if you can't put a position for less than, by any means of less than that, but if there's positions, if there's limitations, so state agencies basically get the money to spend, and they also get the permission to spend the money. And so if we don't have enough permission to spend all the money, then those kind of go through another Ways and Means process, right, to rebalance all of that. But it's really around that 50,000 mark that makes a determination of Ways and Means or not, or certainly, again, positions, limitations, those types of things.
Absolutely correct. For smaller agencies, if you are an agency of 6 or 8 people, sometimes a fiscal impact statement of $15,000 might be enough to raise it to a Ways and Means consideration. But for an agency of our size and almost every other state agency, 50,000 is generally a fairly good benchmark.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Keep on going.
Yeah.
Speaking of,
Who's next? Okay, Adam.
so.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Miller, members of the board. Again, for the record, Adam Crawford, Chief Operating Officer. Just like Jonathan has an exciting time of year, this is a super exciting time of year for us as well. It's budget season. We're getting to this point of figuring out what is our budget for the next 25, 27 biennium. What does that look like? Going through that process. Again, in tab 4, you'll see our governor's recommended budget laid out. Just to give you some top line ways I look at this, it's very close to a current service level budget by and large, with one notable exception that I'll call out. If you've never kind of wrapped your arms around current service level, really the question current service level seeks to ask is, look at everything you were doing in your previous biennium with understanding of inflationary pressures. What does it cost you to do those same things next time? That is what current service level is supposed to be. There are sometimes long and holy wars fought over whether or not those inflationary pressures are accurately captured in that current service level. But there's a series of ground rules and agreements between both the executive and legislative branch about what those inflationary factors are. So the one place that I would call out where we are a noticeable difference for our 25-27 governor's recommended budget is in something called Project 1 ODA. It is an IT project that's unique for two different reasons. One, it's a fairly significant IT project that seeks to move us from an Apple computing environment to a Windows-based computer environment. There's a bunch of really good reasons to do that, either cybersecurity, help desk, technical support, really alignment with the enterprise as a whole as we move into the next phase of our computing environment. The second thing that's interesting about this is, for the first time, I think, and I'll use Jonathan as a lifeline, I think in about 20 years, the Department of Agriculture is seeking bonding to do this. So it's budgetarily and financially, that is a little bit of a different environment, and specifically general fund backed bonding to do this. So this would not be other fund backed bonding revenue that we otherwise create. So it's an exciting time, and us trying to figure out both the modernization of the IT environment as well as the financial components. We think we've got a really good base underneath us, but it's something that we're going to be keeping a very, very close eye on. As you kind of step through the governor's recommended budget, items that you see, like I say, some fairly standard reductions taken at the governor's recommended budget by the chief financial office, as well as some pops otherwise laid out. Primarily, you'll see a bunch of fee increases. Jonathan mentioned those fee bills. An agency, to give you potentially more information than what you want, an agency has the capacity to raise their fees outside of the legislative process, so long as they don't do it over statutory caps. However, those revenues are not built into the next budget, absent some voice from the legislature affirming those fee changes. And so that's why you will see those revenue-only policy option packages in there. It's the agency asking for those fee changes to be affirmed for the 25-27 budget, as well as moving forward. Major dates to keep in mind. March 24th and March 25th, those will be our budget hearing days. Those are days we go in front of the Subcommittee on Natural Resource to lay out our budget, what we're doing, what we hope to do. March 26th will be our opportunity for the public to weigh in. Certainly encourage your attention around there. A few other items that I would probably note as well. There is also a thing called budget notes. In an agency budget, the legislature has the capacity to put something called a budget note in your budget. It's essentially the legislature saying, for this topic, I would like this agency to come back at a later date and tell us more about it. In 2023, this was around the Cannabis Reference Laboratory. It was a direction for the Department of Agriculture and the Oregon Liquor and Control Commission, now Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission, to go away and work on a Oregon Cannabis Reference Laboratory for Oregon. And the legislature wanted a report back about that effort in 2025. So sometime in the week of March 31st, you will likely see us, along with the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission, in front of the Joint Committee on Transportation and Economic Development, explaining our efforts there. Again, to reiterate Jonathan's point around May 14th. What will happen after we do our budget presentation and after a few other agencies go as well, that March 14th revenue forecast day is really kind of the starting gun for the end of session. It's the beginning where the legislature has a complete understanding of what revenues they have coming into the 25-27 biennium, and then it gives them the opportunity to figure out what decisions they would like to make. I would like to take a chance both regarding this as well as Jonathan's other point around fiscal impact statements. This is a time where things move very, very quickly, where you will also sometimes get a call from the legislature at 9 o'clock demanding or asking a question and demanding an answer as quickly as possible, but no later than 10:30 sort of thing. So you move very, very quickly. You really want to appreciate everyone in the agency who helps support that work as those really fast-moving things come up, specifically in some of the groups that I work with, Andrea Boyer and Adam Sendelbaugh, who really do an excellent job with the fiscal impact statements and chasing down those impacts and making sure they're standardized and across the agency. It is an exciting time. It's a fast-paced time, and it's something that we really want to set our feet right and do the work in the front end so that we are successful by the time we get to the end of legislative session. We're excited about the opportunity to do that, and given the governor's recommended budget that we have in front of us, we think we're positioned in a really good place. There are some, as we move into the next biennium, some areas of uncertainty that I may look to Lindsay to help flesh out. But happy to pause there if you have questions.
Director Simonich, Dean Simonich.
Stacy Simonich for the record. Under the governor's budget, the federal funds that are there, not a major part of the overall budget, but certainly significant. Are there any, what makes up those federal funds? And is there any, how much uncertainty now is linked to those federal funds?
Great segue.
Okay, good.
Chair Miller, Director Charploy, and some members of the committee. For the record, my name is Lindsay Eng, Deputy Director of the Department of Ag. I'm going to clean up here on federal funds because there, as you know very well, there is a significant amount of uncertainty for it. I would say, first of all, in our budget document there, the federal funds there really represent our limitation, which is essentially the biggest amount that we have ability to spend. So given, I would say right now we're in a large period of uncertainty, but we've been seeing uncertainty and cuts in federal spending for quite a long time. And so that's probably a little bit over what we're currently operating under with federal funds, but certainly lots of uncertainty there. So I kind of like to describe where we are with federal funds in three different categories. So I think the first one is kind of the lack of full appropriations and a new fully formed funding farm bill since 2018, right? So just like we have in the state, and we've talked to you guys a lot about on other funds, we have inflationary pressures when the farm bill isn't updated for such a long time, and we're operating on these continuing resolutions. We see, funding levels not actually meet that CSL, right? That's not done, especially for a lot of the work we do. A good portion of our federal funds are actually like fee-for-service work, where we're conducting inspections for the federal government, we're doing meat inspections, or we're doing work on federal lands, that kind of stuff. And so that has had pretty steady decreases over the past 5 years. And that's been already a struggle for us. Usually we've looked at, I think just this year, over last, we had 30% that was just kind of a standard across the board. So that's really difficult for us to plan for. And I think you'll hear when Chris Benneman from our plant division talks, I think that's on tomorrow. She'll probably talk a lot about that and kind of the challenges of, can we still do the same amount of work for the same money from 2018, right? Which we can. The other issue is the kind of administrative executive orders and some of the, I don't want to say Doge because it's a charged group, but where we've mostly seen that kind of impact is in our block grant programs, and then grants that we don't necessarily give, but they go directly to producers. Our two big block grant programs, especially crop block grant, and we have an RFSI grant that also is a partner with your guys' RFBC grant. Those have kind of been caught up a bit in that where USDA and the federal government are reviewing those programs and are determining whether they meet the needs. I would say over the past month, a lot of our significant trying to get answers has been focused around those AMS programs. The LFPA program, which is a local food purchasing program, was one that was recently, all 2025 grants were going forward. That is not administered by us currently. That's administered by Oregon ODHS in the state, as well as there is an LFSCC program, which is local food for schools and childcare centers. We were going to take over the state administration of that grant, but it was cut back to for FY25 funds and cut going forward. So those are two big impacts to the state. A lot of those are commodity procurement that is going to producers for schools or for local purchases. So that's had a big impact on our industry. We still have not heard on RFSI. Where we have about $6 million over the 5 years. And the only big portion of that we have granted out is our equipment only grants. We have some pretty large infrastructure grants that we've selected, but they haven't passed through USDA. So we are still waiting to see what will happen with that program. For the state, one of the biggest worries is whether we will be reimbursed for work under these programs that producers are out there doing, and then we reimburse them for. We've been trying to keep as tight as we can. We've asked our RFSI equipment only grantees to hold off work if they can until we can get clarity. But many of them were kind of at the end of their projects. On the specialty crop block grant side, those grants run for about a 3-year cycle, and we get about $2 million to sub-grant out to specialty crop producers each year. So we have quite a few of those that are still running. We did just hear yesterday, and I won't say officially because nothing seems to be official, but we heard yesterday that program has been, because it's specifically authorized through Congress, that program has come back online, and they believe it has gone through the review. One of the executive order other issues that I'll just mention because it's kind of related to this is anything that kind of came out of the previous administration, the infrastructure recovery grant money. There was a big expansion of CCC, Commodity Credit Corporation, to help producers coming out of COVID, and anything in the American Recovery Act. Those have been specifically targeted, and so those are the ones that we're really most worried about. RFSI is in that group, and there was also a HR 133 stimulus package that kind of we got in specialty crop that we think will be okay, but it was a 2021 kind of extra stimulus that all of the states received in there. We have about $4 million outstanding in those older specialty crop grant projects of work that's still being done that we will be reimbursing. The other thing is talking with the seafood industry, Section 32 funding, which is kind of commodity procurement funding, has been really important for a lot of our producers, and it usually happens every year. Our seafood industry received $50 million in 2023 in procurement packages, and also $22 million in 2024, and they were denied this year for all of that funding. That they don't believe that they'll be receiving Section 32 funding. So a lot of this is the jarring from, we've had a lot of stimulus and we've had a lot of money going into local food purchasing programs, and a lot of that seems to be not going forward. And then I will just close by talking about the third rung of uncertainty with federal funding, and that's really the budget going forward. I think that the Congressional House Republicans released kind of a budget framework that would significantly impact states, not only in the work they do, but also in the staffing in the federal government, obviously, as we saw. And so I think that particularly for the important programs where we work with our federal partners, that's our biggest concern of what will the states need to pick up, especially with plant pest and disease, with animal disease control, those kinds of things. So that is really a big unknown that continues to plague us and keep me up at night. So I can go into more detail if anyone has questions, but that's kind of, it's uncertainty all around.
On that note, no, yes, it's uncertainty, and some of us have been dealing with that in foreign affair issues, which 80% were done. So, yeah, so we'll see if domestically things fare a little better for the process. So, any questions of our panel on budget legislation? Yes, Director Norris?
Ellie Norris, for the record. How optimistic are we for the Farm Bill going forward in 2025?
I can answer that, actually. Unless, I probably have, of everyone in the room, I probably have the most recent information. I serve as Stacy Simonich, for the record, the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, all the deans of agriculture in the U.S. We were in D.C. Meeting and lobbying. I'm the chair of the Farm Bill Committee for that group, and had various meetings, some pictures of which you can find on LinkedIn, and our only hope, I think, is maybe this summer, but I would give it 40 or 50% probability. But I'm tracking it closely for land grant universities across the country.
Thank you. It's great that we have two leaders that are helping lead the national efforts in dealing with this. So that's great, Director Simonich. Any other questions or comments?
There's no other questions. I would just, Chair Miller, Director Sharple, Hanson, members of the board, I would just wrap up by saying, one, I think, how we present our information, it might look, look easy, be able to put it all together, but really a lot of this work is because of our division directors, our managers, the staff here at ODA. Like it all it all works together. We all work really well together. And just a huge thank you to everyone who does an immense amount of work to bring in not only the board packet, but during the budget process, the legislative pieces, tracking unexpected adventures through federal funding. It's a lot of work, and while we get to be able to present it, there's many more people who are doing the actual detail work. So just wanted to say thank you to all of them who are listening and who are in the room today.
Well, thank you and thank all of them, because it has been a very different year in 2025, and your leadership is very much appreciated. So thank you. Yeah, is the video? We'll try the video. A happy note.
I can speak a little bit more to the campaign if it's going to take, if you would like.
Hey, thank you. I didn't feel like stalling any further, so thank you.
And I'll be brief, and we can try again if it's not working. But so this campaign is a really great opportunity for the Department of Ag. Regions Blue Cross Blue Shield is underwriting the campaign with KGW. And they are running this we're starting in March, and we'll run it all the way through October. So we're really excited to have been asked to help and participate. We also have a partner, a group called Taste of Oregon, that is associated with the James Beard Public Market. And they've been doing monthly restaurant promotions highlighting Oregon commodities at Portland restaurants. So this campaign will have a Hello Portland, which is one of KGW's morning shows. They'll have a chef segment monthly on that show highlighting different commodities. This month is potatoes, and the other ones as the seasons come through. All of those monthly chef demos will also be paired with news segments as well, where they will do news segments on parts of the agricultural community, things that are going on to work on local food development, on health, agriculture and food, and its help in the communities and economic development. So it's really exciting. We have the ability to give some really great information on the news side, as well as support the excitement and culinary side of Oregon agriculture. So.
Very cool. Very cool. And it looks like we may actually be seeing the commercial. Sound.
Here we go.
Could we start again with the sound up, please?
Technology is great when it works.
I've got an idea. Let's play with this during the break and get it ready to go, and we'll roll with it after the break. How's that? Good. Thank you. All right. We are very pleased that we have an agenda item on working lands in Oregon. And I don't know if, Director, you want to kind of tee this up for us?
So excited to have, actually, it'll be two I think, presentations that really had the opportunity to spend some time working with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, thinking about the and in terms in environmental protection and production agriculture and how they can work better hand in hand and the opportunities for us to work together. A lot of this came together because of work of the Climate Action Committee, and I see Kathy McDonald, Chair McDonald, online, and she'll be here to speak with you as well. There was funding made available during the last legislative session for working lands, and the agencies have really been trying to come together to uplift this message that fish and wildlife and agricultural working lands can coexist and benefit each other. And what does that do in terms of natural options for helping us mitigate some of the impacts of a changing climate? And what do agricultural lands do, you know, in terms of helping us with those big rain events and others and sequestration and so on. And so I'm excited about this work. I think you'll hear some more about it. We're thinking about how to incorporate it into our next board meeting in LeGrand as well to build upon. I know that the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, their commission, is doing a lot of work around working lands as well. So this may be a place where we can find some synergies and collaboration.
I'm not sure who's going to kick off here.
I think it's going to be me. I think Carla's going to pull up a slideshow for us. Chair Miller, Director Hanson, members of the board, for the record, my name is Troy Abercrombie, and I'm the program manager for the Native Plant Conservation Program and the Noxious Weed Control Program here at the Department of Ag. I'm joined by Sarah Reif to my right from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and Chair Kathy McDonald of the Oregon Climate Action Commission, who will be joining us remotely. And we've prepared a slideshow for you that's being shown on the screen if you want to follow along. I think you also have maybe printouts of the slides as well. Go to the next slide, Carla. So when we're talking about natural and working lands, I think it's easier to, if you were to make a list of the lands that don't fall under that categorization, because when we're talking about them, we're talking about forests and rangelands, farmlands, wetlands, estuaries, our rivers, urban forests, and even our parks and green spaces. And there's a lot of really great reasons on why we here at the Department of Ag and the folks over at ODFW prioritize working on these lands, because they really are just foundational to our way of life here in Oregon. Billions of dollars in economy is tied to these lands, hundreds of thousands of jobs, generations of cultural significance, and all of these lands also provide habitat for fish and wildlife. They provide a myriad ecosystem services, contribute to food security, as well as natural climate solutions. And so because of all that, the stakes are really high here. And the list of threats to these lands is long: drought and fire and invasive species, the subsequent impacts to water quality, our food supply and safety and food security, eventual cost to consumers, and then threats to our infrastructure. And so we all share a vision of an Oregon with resilient natural and working lands that provide for our cultural and economic needs while maintaining high functionality to deliver those ecosystem services that we depend on. And now more than ever, conserving and protecting these lands is really important because we're losing them. We've lost 4% of our farmland from 2017 to 2022, over 43,000 acres of farmland since 1987 from rezoning alone, and over 65,000 acres from all the causes put together from 2001 to 2019. And so as we engage in this work, we also do feel like the board can play a role in our efforts as a facilitator for meaningful dialogue, as an advisor on behalf of the different industries in agriculture, and as an advocate for the continued support of this work. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how just kind of historically and currently that we've worked on these lands outside of the scope of House Bill 3409 and the Natural Working Lands Fund. Next slide. Working lands are what we do here at the Department of Agriculture. That's our space. That's where we work to provide resources and support to Oregon agriculture across 15 million acres of ag lands that support 70,000 producers and over 35,000 farms that produce over 200 and 20 crops. And so we've been doing this kind of work for a long time before we started looking through the lens of natural climate solutions. And the same is true for ODFW. And so I'll pass it off to Sarah to give a little bit of context there.
Thanks, Troy, and good morning, Chair Miller, Director Charplo Hansen, members of the board. For the record, I am Sarah Reif. I am the Acting Deputy Director of the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I normally serve as the Habitat Division Administrator, where I oversee our land and water programs and our grant programs, and a lot of the work that we're doing around natural working lands is coming through the Habitat Division of ODFW. Happy to be here today and be a part of this presentation. I might be back. Yeah, okay.
Oh, I missed this slide.
You missed a slide. Do you want to go back, or do you want me to?
I could real quick. It's just that's a list of all the different ways that we've been engaging in this work historically through the technical assistance that we provide in different programs, policy and regulation work we do, support for water quality programs in our soil and water conservation districts, our certification and inspection programs, multiple granting programs that support a lot of different industry, including our specialty crops and the farmers that produce them, noxious weed and biocontrol programs, our insect pest and prevention programs, and we even engage in fire recovery efforts across the landscape. So, thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Carla. If we could go back to my working lands or wildlife habitat slide. So, wildlife don't see administrative boundaries, right? They move across the landscape to meet their needs. And working lands are really important wildlife habitat. They go where the resources are. Working lands are some of the most productive lands as wildlife habitat, and I'm sure as producers, you know that maybe all too well. But what you can see across the landscape is that while federal lands and public lands are really important for fish and wildlife habitat, the private resource lands are also really critical. In DLCD's recent Farm and Forest report, they pointed out some just really interesting statistics. We at ODFW did some work recently to map priority connectivity areas for wildlife. So these are crucial areas for wildlife movement that we'd like to sustain long term. And 94% of those priority wildlife connectivity areas occur on non-federal working lands, on resource lands, as well as the vast majority of winter range for deer and elk. 97% of the winter range for deer and elk in eastern Oregon occurs on non-federal resource lands. And it's pretty high on the west side as well. I think it's 88%. So in the mosaic of land ownerships around the state, working lands are a critical piece of the puzzle. And it's also where we find some of our greatest partnerships. Next slide, please. ODFW has a really long history of partnering with landowners and agricultural producers. Our mission is to protect and enhance Oregon's fish, wildlife, and habitats for present and future generations. We're focused on species resiliency. We're thinking about that in the context of, lengthening droughts, increasing scale of fire and other natural disasters. So we're also looking at that in the face of increasing complexity. And those same threats to fish and wildlife are the same threats that farmers and ranchers are facing as well. We're all struggling with drought. We're all struggling with invasive species. We're all struggling with big fire. And so we share a lot of the stressors. We share a lot of the goals for keeping working lands sustainable. We have a vested interest in keeping working lands working. We've done this work. Our biologists on the ground all around the state have partnered with landowners always. It's in our bones. We prioritize those partnerships, and we're not regulatory in most cases. There's a few arenas where we have regulatory authority, but by and large, we are not a regulatory agency. And so we secure good things for fish and wildlife through collaboration and through partnership. And through voluntary conservation. Our biologists around the state serve in a variety of roles that support working lands. We have a lot of staff out there that provide technical assistance whether it's on land use, waterway alteration, or restoration practices. We have regional habitat biologists located throughout the state in each of our ODFW administratively delineated watershed districts. We're very proud of, we have 5 conservation liaisons that are partner positions with the NRCS that are located in Tillamook, the Dalles, Redmond, Tangent, and Klamath Falls. And those NRCS partner bios really work to implement a lot of the wildlife practices and conservation benefits that are of interest to landowners through the Farm Bill programs. We do have a sense of urgency around this work. As Troy mentioned, there's a lot of land use change. During legislative session, there's always a lot of land use bills that we tend to align with a lot of the agricultural stakeholders on. We really feel like there's a bit of a tipping point here in terms of the future of working lands and the sustainability of working lands. And so we're really leaning in to the conversation. We're really leaning in with our interests and aligning those with agriculture. Director Sharplow Hansen mentioned that our Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission has been interested in this work lately. Just this past December, we hosted a roundtable with the Oregon Fish and Wildlife Commission and a lot of ranchers and farmers and producers from all around the state. And we asked this question of what does it take to keep working lands working? And we framed that conversation around what are some of those pressures that producers are facing that make it challenging to consider adding fish and wildlife habitat projects on top of all the other issues they're facing. They're either dealing with big fire or market pressures, and then to add fish and wildlife considerations and issues, there's just not much bandwidth. There's not much capacity for it. And so it was a really enlightening conversation. I think we strengthened partnerships and identified some opportunities to maybe be more creative and chart paths working forward. And so we really appreciate the invitation from you all to be here today, because I think, as you'll hear from Kathy and again from Troy, lately there's just been this really great coming together of the agencies and partners around working lands, and we think there's a lot of really great opportunity going forward. So I think with that, I will pass it to Chair McDonald.
Thank you, Sarah and Troy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Chair Miller, Director Sharplow Hansen, thank you so much for the opportunity to come talk to you about the work that the Oregon Climate Action Commission is doing around natural and working lands. For the record, my name is Kathy McDonald. I am the chair of the Oregon Climate Action Commission. And again, very pleased to be here. I do apologize that I'm not there in person. That was my plan, but circumstances conspired against me on that front today. Next slide, please. Just a very brief background on the Oregon Climate Action Commission. We were established in 2007 by the legislature as the Oregon Global Warming Commission. We do get staff support from the Oregon Department of Energy, but unlike your board and many other boards and commissions in Oregon, we are not specifically tied to the Oregon Department of Energy. We really are designed to be a place to kind of synthesize and look across all of the state's efforts on climate action, and to with specifically 3 kind of charges that we were given in 2007 to track progress against climate mitigation goals, which were also established in 2007, to make recommendations for changes to policies and programs that could accelerate Oregon's climate action, and to educate Oregonians about the risks of climate impacts and the need for mitigation. And we primarily have done that to date through the production of a biennial report that we produce. And our latest one was produced in December 2024. In House Bill 3409, in 2023. We were modernized to the new name. Our membership was expanded. We got some additional responsibilities and some agency capacity to support the commission, which was great. We currently have 13 voting members. 10 of those members sit in named seats of areas of expertise, including agriculture. And I'm pleased that Commissioner Reitman, who fills that seat on the commission at this time, was able to join us today. I hope that he'll be able to introduce himself, but we'll maybe hold that just to make sure we keep you on time with your agenda. And then 3 at-large positions that are voting members, 4 legislators, 3 non-voting academic positions, and 15 agency directors. So a very large commission. And as I mentioned, an opportunity to kind of synthesize and look across the state enterprise on the state's climate actions. The director of the Department of Agriculture has been a member of the commission since our inception in 2007. Next slide, please. In 2020, Governor Brown directed the commission to develop a proposal for increasing net sequestration in natural and working lands as part of Executive Order 20-04. And we spent a year working on that proposal. We engaged over 1,000 Oregonians through surveys and focus groups. As I recall, the main survey that we sent out to landowners had, I think, 275 responses from folks that self-identified as farmers and ranchers. So we got some really great input that led to kind of identifying principles and in particular recommending strategies for achieving the goal that we also recommended. Next slide, please. We were able to get a start on some of this work through a grant-funded project that we did in partnership with the Natural Resource Conservation Service and the U.S. Climate Alliance that was carried out by the Institute for Natural Resources at OSU, but in 2022. And then in 2023, as part of House Bill 3409, we were directed to take a lot of those foundational elements that we had identified in the 2021 proposal and build those out. And I won't talk through all of these, but just a few. We are currently working on developing a recommendation to the legislature for a net sequestration goal for natural and working lands. We will be developing an inventory and metrics around the land sector. We have the authority and are about to launch a new advisory group on natural and working lands that has 3 positions for agricultural expertise on that advisory group to help the commission with this work. We will also be developing a workforce and training study. And as you heard earlier, a fund was created to invest in some of the programs that agencies are managing to support voluntary landowner and right holder adoption of natural climate solutions, which are essentially practices that either protect, restore, or modify management with the outcome goal of reducing emissions or increasing net sequestration. Next slide, please. So focusing in specifically on the Natural and Working Lands Fund, in 2023, we were allocated $10 million, or actually 4 eligible fund agencies were allocated $10 million. So the 4 agencies, OWEB, ODFW, ODA, and ODF are the eligible agencies for investing these funds. The role of the Climate Action Commission is to work in collaboration with the agencies to identify a suite of projects that we then approve the investments in. Next slide, please. The purpose of the fund, as I mentioned, really grew out of some of the feedback we got from landowners and kind of good governance, I think is a good way to say it. So first and foremost, the funds are identified for use to incentivize, provide technical assistance and financial assistance to advance natural climate solutions. We were directed, as were the agencies, to as much as possible use existing programs and leverage federal funds. We were encouraged to prioritize projects proposed by environmental justice communities and tribes and make sure there is equal access to funds. And then really to look at, as much as possible, optimizing the social health, ecological, climate, and economic benefits of the projects that we're investing in. Next slide, please. We approved 13 investments, and the agencies, in collaboration with the governor's office, did a great job of coming up with a cohesive set of projects that they could invest in, that really focused in on the criteria that the legislation established. And they really did a nice job of bringing a proposal in front of the commission. We approved that proposal in January a year ago, and the agencies have been working diligently to implement the projects that were identified. And it's been such a pleasure to work with Troy on your staff and with Sarah and the other fund agency leads on this important work. Next slide. You're going to hear more from Troy and Sarah about the specific projects that those two agencies are investing in, and I won't spend much time on this, but just to give you a sense of what ODF and OWEB are doing. ODF is really looking at how these funds can help them implement their climate action plan and increase the adoption of climate smart forest practices. They also are kind of thinking to the future and are investing in improving their seed orchard so that we have seeds that are ready for a world where climate change is impacting the distribution of species, and that we have good plant materials to be able to put back in forests. The Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board is got two allocations of funds, one that's going into the Ag Heritage Program, which I think is the next agenda item on your agenda today. So some of the funds are going to that program, and then the rest will be distributed through their regular restoration and technical assistance grants that are designed across all of the 5 different land sector types. But with that, I will turn things back over, I believe, to Troy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And so now you've heard a little bit about how our two agencies at ODFW and ODA have historically engaged in this work, the Climate Commission's role as a result of 3409 and some of the work we're doing now. And so we're going to dive in a little bit specifically to the investments that we've made through the Natural Working Lands Fund from House Bill 3409. ODA submitted 2 proposals to support 2 different projects, one of them for the implementation of the Oregon Native Seed Strategy, the other one for the implementation of a wide-scale rangeland resilience initiative focused on invasive annual grass impacted rangelands. I won't go into much detail on the rangeland resilience one, but it sounds like we might have an opportunity to talk about that more in depth at a future meeting. That said, we're really excited to engage in that arena. We've had lots of requests over the years to engage with partners who are doing that type of work, but we haven't had the capacity to do so. And so now we do, thanks to the funding we got through the Working Lands Fund and a 5-year partnership that we forged with the NRCS to bring on 2 rangeland health specialists that will provide technical assistance and subject matter expertise, consultation services, and assist landowners in accessing other funding, whether it be state or external and federal funds. So really excited about that. But we'll dive in a little bit on the Oregon Native Seed Strategy. The catalyst for this, the development implementation of this strategy, is that as we look across the scale of restoration that we're trying to do and conservation that we're trying to do, there's a massive deficit in the supply of ecologically appropriate native seed stock. And what that leads to is less diverse landscapes, because we don't have the full suite of species that would normally be represented on those landscapes, nor do we have an adequate supply even of the species that we do use currently. And we understand that seed stock is critical to the conservation and restoration of those lands. The strategy itself aims to ensure access to a reliable supply of that seed, and it employs multiple different techniques and initiatives, including seed collection, seed banking, large-scale production, and then technical assistance to landowners. This particular project also includes $125,000 in financial assistance that we were able to provide to tribal nations to support their native plant programs and their restoration efforts. And they're really thankful. We're really thankful for being able to engage with those tribes and to build those relationships as they address those issues and food security for their people. You can go to the next slide. So the strategy itself, which I have a copy of here, it's a really beautiful document, and there are copies of it on the back table. I encourage you all to grab one on your way out. It's a collaborative effort of the Oregon Native Seed Collective. And the collective is led by ODA, and it's a partnership of state, federal, and tribal governments, local governments, NGOs, and academia. We're all united by common missions and a common understanding of the importance of high-functioning native ecosystems. And to that end, the seed strategy serves as a guidance document to support restoration and conservation through the procurement, preservation, production, and storage of native seed in Oregon. Next slide. And so why is this important to natural and working lands? I think we're all starting to see the picture that I'm trying to paint here, but we know that native plant communities on these landscapes are the most resilient, whether that be to catastrophes like wildfire and flood, pressure from drought, even our own anthropogenic influences and our own land uses, right? They put pressure on these landscapes, and native plant communities and native ecosystems are the most resilient to that. They also provide numerous co-benefits in ecosystem services, carbon storage, as Sarah mentioned earlier, all provide habitat for fish and wildlife, create biodiversity, and that leads to productivity. Native landscapes are the most productive landscapes. They also have the greatest cultural significance and value. And so when we restore these lands, making sure that we're using the right seed stock is really, really important, because that seed stock's adapted to those environmental conditions, to the soil conditions, to the water and moisture regimes, to the disturbances that those areas experience, because those plants have evolved in those places with those conditions over time. And so the seed that they produce inherently produces offspring that are also resilient to all those stressors. Next slide. We started early implementation in 2024 to get at least some of the 5 goals that are laid out in the seed strategy. That included a lot of early seed collection and seed banking of some species that had already been identified by partner groups as ones that they were in need of. We partnered with the Institute for Applied Ecology and the Understory Initiative to put on producer trainings. So working with farmers and producers who are already in this native seed sector, as well as farmers who are looking to diversify their operations and get into the native seed market. So put on trainings to show them about different techniques that are used for this work, to teach them about the equipment that is available to them and how to use it for seed cleaning and seed sorting and proper storage, which is a really, really critical component of these seeds to ensure long-term viability. Also, early steps taken for the development of farmer co-ops for native seed farmers, for all the same reasons we develop farmer co-ops for things like vegetable farmers, right? To spread the load, to share resources, share knowledge, and to mitigate the individual risk that any one producer might take on. Also creating shared infrastructure through greenhouses that will be shared space for producers to be able to use to start crops, to build out those early foundational seed lots that they will then need to start larger production runs of these seeds, as well as equipment like seed cleaning and seed sorting equipment that will be available to regionally to different producers to be able to share and to use. Again, a lot of tribal engagement. We reached out to all 9 tribes through this process and have forged partnerships with 5 of them. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying we're going to have to wrap this pretty quick, so we'll
okay.
have time for the next. So
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, and another priority is integration into existing efforts, existing restoration efforts that can implement the strategy. Next slide. So because we're talking about a supply deficit, we think commercial ag, production ag can play a really important role in addressing these supply chain deficiencies. Also provides a diversification opportunity for those producers for value-added production and a high-value crop, as native seeds tend to bring a premium. That leads to opportunities for economic development. And because we have an over $400 million seed industry already in Oregon, it provides an opportunity to leverage our existing expertise and infrastructure. All of that together help us create lasting resiliency and productivity, not only on the landscape, but at the farms themselves.
Okay, great. I'll skip through these pretty quickly here, but just to briefly describe ODFW's work with the Natural Working Lands Funds, we received over $3 million to support diverse projects. One of the assignments we were given when given these funds is please make sure that you're trying to leverage other funds, federal and state dollars as well. And so while we're given $3 million, our projects have leveraged over $5.5 million in federal and other funds as well. So we're pretty proud of how we've been able to really use the state working lands funds as a springboard. We have projects all around the state with floodplain restoration with the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. We have estuary restoration projects with producers and landowners in the Tillamook and Umpqua estuaries that are kind of working at that intersection of protecting the agricultural operations as well as restoring salmonid habitat. Fire resilience in oak woodlands with the Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs. Our farm bill biologist is running a huge landscape scale grassland restoration project in Wasco County with private landowners and on state lands as well. And then we were able to hire 2 natural climate solutions biologists who are serving as technical service providers and really trying to leverage additional funds for more projects with landowners and producers that kind of work at that intersection of carbon sequestration, agricultural production, and fish and wildlife habitat. So we're pretty excited about these projects. They're all in implementation at this point. We have a whole slew of more projects we could do if more funds were provided, but we're pretty excited to be doing this work. I think we'll go ahead and skip this slide. I just wanted to touch on this example. So you've heard from Kathy and Troy and I, and there's the other agencies involved. And I think one thing I'm observing happening is maybe just the interagency relationships that are being forged out of some of this natural working lands policy work are growing in ways that maybe we haven't seen in the past. And this is just one example. It's leading to some really exciting concepts. Troy was talking about the native seed strategy. ODFW has a keen interest in that. We never have enough native seed for our restoration work. So we've got the native seed strategy. We've got our working lands biologists. We work with the SageCon partners, so the local implementation teams that are working on sage grouse conservation. And we're seeing these opportunities to do landscape scale restoration together and post-fire rehabilitation in some of the areas that burned in 2023. So we're developing these project plans, going after funds to get the work happened and looking at getting the work to happen and then looking at trying to build a native seed strategy specific to some of these sagebrush areas. So there's like some really exciting place-based work where agencies and partners and local collaboratives are all working together kind of at that same intersection here that we're talking about with you today. So pretty exciting stuff to come.
And I'll land the plane right here. This is our final slide. I think really the take-home message is that the engagement that we're doing creates opportunity, not only for us as agencies to accomplish our missions through our individual and our collaborative efforts, but for landowners to increase their productivity and safeguard their well-being through the implementation of some of these practices. The development of new markets, that's really exciting to me. That's not an opportunity that comes along very often. And in this case, we have the opportunity to leverage existing markets and existing strengths in service of that. An opportunity across the board for us as agencies with landowners, stakeholders, and partners to identify common values, create shared understanding, and develop more meaningful relationships, and ultimately to restore, conserve, and protect these natural and working lands and the services that they provide.
Chair Miller, if I could just make one last very quick comment.
Sure.
The coalition that really helped advocate for the initial $10 million was very diverse, included a lot of agricultural landowners and managers. There is a $5 million additional fund that's in the governor's approved budget, and we at the commission hope that the board of agriculture and the department will help advocate for the allocation of these funds. Continuity of funding and programs is really important, and that's one of the things we heard from landowners and technical service providers. So we welcome the opportunity to collaborate on advocacy. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Any questions from the board? I really appreciate that. It was a bit of a deep dive, but I think understanding that connectivity to owners and what you're doing, and especially some of the fire, that's going to be a big effort to try to accomplish things through that as well. So, questions from the board? No? Thank you very much. Thank all three of you for joining us for this section.
Thank you.
Next, and it sounds like definitely in unison with with just what we heard, Taylor Larson from OWEP.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Miller and members of the board. My name is Taylor Larson, and I'm the coordinator for the Oregon Ag Heritage Program. So I'm here to talk about one of the 13 programs that receive some of the Natural and Working Lands funds and how we're putting those to use. And I think I can help us make up a little bit of time here, because I'm sure the board is somewhat familiar with the Oregon Ag Heritage Program, as one of your members has for a long time served on the commission that oversees the program, and you are tasked with making nominations for several of the other seats that help guide the program. So yeah, we can start on the first slide. So the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program as a whole consists of 4 grant programs and has a broad purpose to support the long-term agricultural viability of operations throughout the state, as well as the larger economy, while enhancing the underlying ecosystems that those operations depend on. So there's really 3 core grant programs that we have to do this. We have a grant program that supports succession planning. So we can make grants to make sure producers have the access to expertise they need in order to go through that long-term handoff from one ownership structure to the next. And then we also have a conservation easement program where we can fund the purchase of development rights on farm and ranch land to help ensure that folks can sell off development rights that they're not using because they're engaged in agriculture, and then that helps in the long term keep our most valuable farm and ranch land available for agriculture, while helping to keep the price more in line with the agricultural value as opposed to the potential development value. And then the program that I'm going to be talking about today is called our Conservation Management Planning Grant Program. And this program is really designed to pay for long-range conservation planning and then the implementation of those plans through a payment to agricultural producers for ecosystem services delivered as a result of those plans. And so we've received $750,000 through the Natural and Working Lands Fund to launch this grant program. We've run several solicitations for our conservation easement program, but this is the first really fully fledged conservation management planning grant solicitation that we've run. So you'll see up on the slides, we have kind of I'm just going to run through how the program works and then happy to answer questions. But basically, eligible applicants to the program include anybody who's eligible to hold a conservation easement. So this would be land trusts, tribes, SWCDs, and then watershed councils or any other 501c3 organization. So the idea is, agricultural producers themselves are not eligible to apply on their own, but the program is kind of designed to get producers into relationship with a local conservation organization to facilitate that long-range planning and the intergenerational success of the operation. So we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so eligible properties for this grant program are defined as working lands. And so for the purpose of this program, working lands mean lands that are actively used for agriculture and engaged in farming or ranching. So there can be associated other uses. There can be forestry happening on the landscape. There can be other businesses, but the primary purpose or a primary use of the land needs to be for farming and ranching. Okay, next slide. So for the grant itself, there's really kind of three main types of folks involved. So there's us at OWEB, the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, and so we're the ones making the funds available. There's what's called the plan holder. The plan holder would be that local conservation organization, so the SWCD, the Watershed Council, a tribe or a land trust, and they're the ones that are would be the recipient of grant funds from OWEB to engage in the long-term conservation planning and then work with the operator to implement that plan. And so the operator is obviously the person who is managing the day-to-day operations of the agricultural operation on the working land. Okay, next slide. So I'm just going to kind of talk through kind of basically how the program works. So, folks apply. Right now we have an open solicitation for this grant program. If people apply to the program and are successful, the grant program pays for the development of a conservation management plan. So that's people's time to put the plan together. The implementation of that conservation management plan through a payment for ecosystem service model to the agricultural operator themselves. And then folks' time to monitor and report on the plan. So I can just kind of talk through those in a little bit more detail if we go to the next slide. One of the big purposes of the program is to, again, get agricultural operators in a meaningful long-term relationship with a trusted local partner to kind of facilitate that intergenerational, because that's a purpose of the program, right? Is the long-term, from one generation to the next, success of operations in the agricultural economy itself. So a big part of what we pay for is people's time to engage in this long-range planning. So these plans need to be 20 to 50 years in a planning horizon. And we can pay for the producer's time, the plan holder's time, and any third-party consultant's time to put these plans together. And they're really pretty basic. You'll see there's kind of 8 main parts to the plan. I was going to walk through what those are, but I think because we're a little short on time, I'll spare you. They're pretty self-explanatory. And
Maybe you could do a highlight of what you think is important on the list. I don't want to have you rushed.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So purpose of the plan, that's really how does this plan meet the purpose of the Oregon Ag Heritage Program, which I alluded to before, is how does it support the long-term agricultural viability and the underlying ecosystem that operation depends on. So, and then the context is basically just, where is the farm, and what are some of the issues and constraints that the operation is dealing with. The goals, we ask for folks to define their short-term goals. And so the grant program itself makes, grants on a 4 to 5 year time frame. So what are your goals within the grant agreement time frame? And then what are the long-term goals, which, like I mentioned, these plans need to have a 20 to 50 year planning horizon. So what are the, what does this farm need to look like in 20 to 50 years from now in order for whoever is going to be operating it next to be set up for success? And then a resource analysis, what are the natural resources and underlying ecosystem processes? How do those need to be functioning in order for the plan to meet the goals? What are some of the long-range opportunities? And then really the meat of the plan is the action plan, what are you trying to achieve over, a kind of a 3 to 5 year time frame? And this is where we can pay for the implementation of those actions that are described in the conservation management plan. And finally, what are the expected outcomes? And then how is the plan going to be stewarded? So how are you going to monitor to ensure what you said you want to do is happening and that we're getting the outcomes that we're hoping to pay for? Okay, we can go to the next slide. So how does implementation and monitoring work? So basically, once you have a conservation management plan, so you've been awarded a grant, everybody's time is paid for to develop one of these plans, and then it's time to kind of execute the strategies that are detailed in the plan. So there's a list of, and I'll go through these in a second, of approved conservation practices. And basically, this is a subset of existing NRCS conservation practices that we have gone through a process to determine their expected ecosystem service value based on their impacts on water quality, fish and wildlife habitat, and ability to sequester carbon. So, the producer will install the conservation practices, and then the plan holder will conduct annual site visits, submit an annual report, and then we can issue those annual payments. So next slide. So, like I mentioned, we can pay for everybody's time to develop the plan. We can pay for the plan holder's time or some kind of contractor to monitor the plan, and then we can pay for the expected ecosystem services delivered as a result of the plan. And if we go to the next slide, I can kind of talk through what that looks like. Wow, that's small. So this is the list of conservation practices that are eligible for ecosystem service payments with an approved conservation management plan. So once a producer and a plan holder have a plan approved by OWEB, for every year that they're implementing one of these practices that's identified in their conservation management plan, they would be eligible for an annual per acre payment for having that practice in place and functioning. So you'll see, you'll take an example from the top, conservation cover. That has an expected ecosystem service value of $240 per acre per year. And that's, there's some background documentation available on the program's website as to how we got to those numbers, but the quick and dirty is that $240 per acre per year for every year that practice is in place, and that the practice is within its lifespan. So you'll see for conservation cover, the lifespan of that practice is 10 years. If we were to go down to cover cropping, the lifespan of that practice is 1 year. So you would need to implement the practice of cover cropping every year, whereas conservation cover is the establishment of a perennial cover, and so that would be delivering those ecosystem services every year for 10 years before you would need to re-implement the practice. Okay, next slide. So this is just kind of a quick, my attempt at doing a process or a flow chart for how it works. So basically, like I said, we have a solicitation open right now. We'll make grant awards to plan holders, and then we can pay for folks' time to draft those conservation management plans. Once those plans have been drafted, they'll need to be approved by OWEB. And once they're approved, the producer and the plan holder can begin implementing the conservation management plan. monitoring the conservation management plan, reporting their annual reports, which then we can make those annual ecosystem service payments after we receive annual reports every year. It's important to note that while the plans do have a 20 to 50-year planning horizon, the operator and the plan holder can modify their plan at any point in time. It would just need to be reapproved by OWEB. Okay, next slide. So here's just, again, a bit of a process map for the actual grant solicitation. So the grant opened back in February on the 3rd. We've been conducting pre-application consultations with folks who are interested in applying. We did a webinar on the 12th and have done a couple other webinar type things since then. Applications are due on April Fool's Day, and then we'll be engaging in application evaluations. We'll have a technical review team review the applications, and then at a June, and I actually have the date for this, since I made this, I'm pretty sure it's June 10th, we have our commission meeting, where the commission will make funding recommendations to the OWEB board as to which of the projects to fund, and then at the late July OWEB board meeting, those awards will be made, and we can hopefully start the process all over again. So that was a really quick rundown of how the Conservation Management Plan grant program works, but I'm happy to answer questions and engage in dialogue if folks are interested.
Questions? Yes, Director Orm.
Yeah, Eric Orm. So are the grants available to ground that is already in a conservation program like CSP? So if you were doing a practice that you're not currently doing?
Yes, and so, I mean, it's designed to potentially pair with federal funding. So this is all state funds. And so a producer could be, let's just say, in an EQIP contract to do, let's just make it simple, a single conservation practice like conservation cover. And so what NRCS is paying for is a cost share to implement that practice. And then what this program is paying for is the expected ecosystem service benefit. And so we're not paying a producer until that practice has been in place over the year, and we're basically buying the water quality benefit, the fish and wildlife habitat, and the carbon sequestration benefit. Whereas in a lot of the like NRCS programs, what they're paying for is a portion of the expected cost to implement the practice. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Thank you.
Elin Miller for the record. I actually have a follow-on on that. So from a prioritization of what you select, because I've always been confused in Oregon, and now this has helped me, because I've been in conservation programs federally along streams and that sort of thing. And so, but would you prioritize somebody who has not been in any kind of program as a priority for selection first versus those that have been doing some things already, whether it be riparian buffers or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, and we have nearly 30 evaluation criteria for the grant program, and it's not up to me. So we have the technical review team, we have the commission, and we have ultimately the board. But all that being said, I mean, the criteria really drive at the purpose of the program. So to what degree is the implementation of this plan going to support the long-term agricultural viability of the operation? And then, what is it going to do for fish and wildlife habitat and water quality? So it's a non-answer to your question, but
yeah,
sorry.
Well, you're getting going, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And you definitely got us up ahead of time,
I
actually.
thought I could.
So thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. It was very, very helpful and understanding. So we are at a break. So during the break, we're going to figure out if we can get that commercial running. And then we'll go ahead and reconvene for public comment at 11 o'clock. So again, I don't think there's anybody here for public comment, but if there's anybody online that we haven't had signed up yet, let us know. So we'll go ahead and break and
So there are a couple of things we could do as housekeeping if we have no public comment. that Carla could help us with.
Okay.
And so if we could use that time before we break for lunch, that would be very helpful in skinning things up so we can get you out of town on Friday.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great. So let's go ahead and do the full break till 11. And in the meantime, we'll get our heads together to see if we can expedite a few other things. Great. Thank you.
I need to start hunting
Early-
around for an unused version of this one.
Okay, let's reconvene the Board of Agriculture meeting. We do not have anyone signed up for testimony during this time, so we have a few housekeeping items we thought would make sense to be able to, we could deal with. And Carla, do you want to kick off on potentially there's, as any legislative issue happens, things change, and so our schedules have changed, and on your, we've got a new list of who we're all seeing. But Carla, could you go ahead and just walk us through?
I will. I'll just make one comment on public comment. You do have one written comment that we received, and it's in your book, just so to make note that we did receive.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes.
written comment.
And I think that was a new organization that's formed and kind of who they are and what they're all about. So that was actually very interesting. They're not online though or anything. Okay. Okay, good.
And then moving on to this afternoon, during the break, I put on your table a new updated schedule for the appointment schedule, and also a transportation schedule for you to know who you'll be riding with over to the Capitol. But back to the afternoon schedule, we do plan to leave here at 12:30 sharp, because at 1 o'clock you all will be attending the Senate Committee on Natural Resources. So the entire board will go to that first 1 o'clock meeting. And Director Sharpelo-Hanson and Chair Miller and Vice Chair Orem will give testimony at that hearing. We've been invited to provide some comments at the kickoff of that hearing. And so then in the afternoon, you'll see that you're broken into 3 groups on the page. So that's who you will be coordinating with this afternoon, and who the staff support person that you will be with during those meetings. From the previous meeting, Chad, we moved you around to a different group, so you will have a shift if you had looked previously on that.
Carla, where are we departing from? So we're all
going to gather right here.
Okay.
And then we will depart to the different vehicles. We'll have 2 vehicles out in the rear parking lot, and 1 vehicle is in the basement. But we will have drivers collect everybody here at 12:30 or 12:25, let's say, so we can get downstairs to the cars and get on the road to get you over there, because you do need to spend some time getting into the Capitol, right? Through a security check there.
Yeah, I see Director Orem's listed in 2 cars.
We're going to drop the 4th car. He's listed, he will be in car 3.
Jump back and forth.
Yeah, I was thinking, boy, it's pretty special having 2 cars.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'll also bring to your attention, in your packet, are the talking points for this afternoon, for you to have as notes during your legislative meetings, just a reference for some high-level talking points. We will also have in a packet that the coordinator will take copies of our legislative report that you can hand out to those folks. And also we've included copies of the ODA governor's budget 1-pager document, if that is relevant to your conversations, and you can leave that with the folks that you're meeting with.
So again, though, the main purpose was to basically talk about the report.
Mm-hmm.
that
And
we have,
in the talking points that you have, there's highlights for each key issue that is in the report. So if you want to bring something up about climate and water, there's some talking points there for you to rely on.
Are we physically bringing copies? Okay. So we'll be able to just
hand those out.
Excellent. Okay, great.
Anybody have any questions about that?
You know,
And then-
so is a half hour enough time to get over there? I just want to make sure that, I mean, the Capitol was crazy yesterday, and I don't know if it's going to be crazy today, but is that enough time?
We could try to leave a little earlier
It
than
might
that.
make some sense. I hate to.
Want to gather at 12:15?
Yeah, I think because we're going to
Get
have,
down to the cars by 12:20
we're going to
and
get our
over
lunch
there by 12:30.
soon too.
Mhm.
So, okay.
Yep.
Okay,
So
so
12:15.
we'll meet here
right
in
here.
this room at 12:15 to proceed to our cars. So, does that work for everybody with your schedules and all?
They're behind.
Okay, and I think that Dean Simonich is not joining us because she has some interviews she needs to perform, and I don't think she's going to join us for this evening for dinner. The other logistic thing is we all get at 5:30.
Correct. So the plan is that the driver that you are in will take you to the Capitol this afternoon. We'll also swing back at the end of your last meeting
here
and pick you up at the Capitol to bring you back here.
Okay.
And then dinner reservation is at 5:30. So you can all take your own personal vehicles to dinner this evening.
Okay, that's great.
Anybody have any questions about the visits this afternoon?
Is everybody good? All right. We did also have one other thing we wanted to think about and discuss and announce.
So I wanted to thank Carla Valnes for her service to the board. This will be Carla's last official meeting with us as we've been working through continuous improvement and making modifications to our realignment here in the agency. Carla is going to go back and work with our economic development team and really be the liaison between the director's office and that team. That's where she came from. That's where I met her in the early years of my career. And I think that's really one of the places that her passion lies, is around economic development and looking for opportunities for Oregon agricultural products. And so Carla has been steadfast with us in terms of the last several years, supporting the board. The plan for us going forward, Sherry Kudna is in the director's office. She previously supported the board under another administration. She's going to help fill the gap. We will be hiring someone for the board assistant, as well as a couple other duties, and we're tying that into our communications team. So Andrea Cantu-Shomez, who's in the back of the room, will also be part of the planning team for upcoming board meetings. I think LeGrand will likely be a handoff meeting. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we'll try and smooth that out as much as we can with the handoff. And hopefully by the time we get to our September meeting, things will be back in place and rolling along. But Carla, thank you so much for all you've done for the board and your work.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure to help support and coordinate the board. And also, I've learned a lot. I've been with the agency a number of years, and it's always a learning experience and opportunity. So I very much appreciate being part of the board and getting an update on all of our agency activities and the work that everyone's doing. So, but I'm not going anywhere, so I'll be
No.
around, but just not in this role.
Well, Carla, we so appreciate what you've done for us. It's like anything, go to Carla, will know. And thank you for that. And also the wisdom you brought and really your history with ODA of your touch points, I think added a tremendous amount of value. But I think it was dinner at our last meeting that I had a chance to sit with you at dinner, and the passion on looking at your next step opportunity, even though it wasn't even, I don't think it was even in the the, but just because of your past, when I asked Lisa, well, where is she going? I said, yes. So anyway, good deal. Thank you. And we'll all have a chance to, if anybody wants to say a few words, we do have a minute here, but I think we'll have a chance to chat with you tonight too. So, all right, great. Thanks. So, we are basically at the time. What's
I think she had a couple more
cleanup items? Okay.
One more thing that we can get ahead of the curve on before you leave this time. On your table in your packet is your travel claim form as normal. But each year we do need you to sign an additional document to allow you to claim your mileage when you travel to the building. So there's an additional form there. And then in addition, every year, we need you to fill out the board compensation and stipend declaration. So if you could look at that form again and declare if you are eligible and interested in claiming the stipend.
Okay, so Carla, just to make sure, because we had at least paper clipped together, so I'm finding it. I found obviously the expense form, and then the second form is the authorization to use private vehicles, and then there's a third one that wasn't with these.
I did not include that in your packet. Since you were reappointed in November, you had already done your compensation form for 2025.
Okay.
So everyone else should have a compensation form attached to their packet as well.
Great. So what I would suggest is, since we have some time now to get, we can't quite do the expense one, but the others filled out, to get to Carla so we can have that paperwork done in advance. So anything else, Carla?
One other thing. This past week or two, the 2025 training has been distributed to your Workday accounts. Annually, board and commission members, as well as all employees, are required to take an updated sexual harassment training. So if you could log into your Workday account, or if you have trouble getting into your Workday account, please let me know. That training is required to be completed by September of this year.
Yeah, and cybersecurity too. We call it something different. The IT security that's required too.
I believe so, yes, but that has not been. They come out at different times, so I'll try to alert you as to when those get posted to your Workday account. But right now, only the sexual harassment training has been allocated out.
Because I thought I looked toward the end of the year, because we got a notification to say that we needed to, do this training for the fall. Oh, maybe because it was a reappointment is why I got it early. Okay. All right, good. So that will be coming. And also one of the other trainings that sometime we'll be able to have is on public meetings. Because definitely there's been some changes, legislative changes. And there had been a workshop that had been scheduled at a time where it was in conflict with our meeting, I think, our last board meeting. And so if there's some other training, or I'm sure they'll have a module coming out on that for public meeting law.
That training now is being coordinated by the Oregon Ethics Commission.
Yes.
And they have been doing some live, we'll call them, trainings on the new public meeting laws for board and commission members. I know that they are working towards getting an online module so people could take that training on their own. Right now, they're only offering it at specific times, and it is a live training. So
and you can't view it later.
Yeah, I don't know the schedule for upcoming ones, and they've also restricted it to like 40 or 50 people at a time, so they fill up very quickly. So I will check into the status of that public meetings training and make sure that everybody is aware of that and the opportunities for that training, because there have been some changes.
Super. Lisa, do you have anything more to add? Okay. Well, that kind of buttons it up. We'll be recessing for our legislative visits and then reconvening the board meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30. And we will meet here to travel on the legislative visits instead at 12:15. So we've got a little time. And where are we at on lunch? I assume, is it already here?
It is.
Well done. What perfect timing. What perfect timing. All right, good deal. All right, let's go ahead and recess. Thank you.